too, was shifting from race to class.
Mm-hmm.
His last movement was the Poor People's March on Washington. Mm-hmm. And in the interim period, he was working with the sanitation workers, which was a class issue. Even
mm-hmm.
though there were black men involved, it was fundamentally a class mm-hmm. issue. Mm-hmm. Organized labor was involved in that. Unions were involved in that. And Malcolm was also dealing with economic mm-hmm. issues. He was approaching it from a Pan-African standpoint. He was mm-hmm. approaching it from an anti-colonial or anti-imperialist standpoint. Mm-hmm. Dr. King's anti-imperialist position was against the war in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Malcolm's anti-imperialist position was against what America was doing in the Congo, mm-hmm. what America was doing in Ghana, what mm-hmm. America was doing mm-hmm. with Egypt. Mm-hmm. So he was able to pull together allies in Africa, allies in the Muslim world, and if he had been able to get allies in the civil rights movement, mm-hmm. then that case that he was trying to take to the World Court and the United Nations would have been very effective, because mm-hmm. he would have had the full momentum of the African American freedom mm-hmm. movement inside America, mm-hmm. plus the freedom movement in Africa, mm-hmm. Asia, and in the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. And at that time, you know, a lot of the African countries were becoming independent. They were becoming members of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And had a voice in the United mm-hmm. Nations. Mm-hmm. You also will remember that King met with Johnson, and Johnson advised him to go and talk with Ralph Bunche and mm-hmm. Chief Goldberg in the United mm-hmm. Nations. Mm-hmm. Bunche tried to discourage him mm-hmm. from coming out against the war in mm-hmm. Vietnam. Of course, he was inside the United Nations mm-hmm. working on behalf of the United States. So it was a very exciting time to have lived through that period, to have been of age during that period of time. Mm-hmm. And I think that we learned a lot. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, with the forces of reaction coming down, and once Nixon came into power mm-hmm. and the conservative element started, mm-hmm. and all this massive campaign to eliminate the movement, then I think we started regressing. Mm-hmm. And when the 70s came in, things was just unraveling, mm-hmm. coming apart at that time, because you didn't have mm-hmm. these leaders. One other point I want to make real quick, and that is J. Edgar Hoover, who had started out being against Marcus Garvey. Mm-hmm. Then he developed this theory that he wanted to stop the rise of a Messiah. Mm-hmm. And so getting rid of Malcolm, getting rid of Martin Luther King was based on this mystical mm-hmm. idea that he had of stopping the rise mm-hmm. of a Messiah. Mm-hmm. And that's really what his obsession was with Malcolm, Martin, and Garvey.
Mm-hmm. And all of these individuals represented to him
the possibility
of
a Moses mm-hmm. rising up in modern-day Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Baldwin, over the last few minutes, let's have you to sort of say something in reference not only to these two assassinations, but in reference to where we can go from here to make our people much more sensitive in terms of what these individuals were able to accomplish and what they did for the movement entirely.
Mm-hmm. I think in a sense with the assassination of King and Malcolm, the movement sort of turned the corner. Mm-hmm. Dr. AAl-Hadid made a comment that I think is important, because after the assassination of King, conservative political forces moved into power mm-hmm. and tried in many cases to turn back the clock. Mm-hmm. I think what we have to make sure of today, and we've had to pay attention to this since the assassinations, mm-hmm. is that the death of these men the deaths of these men don't mean what? The death mm-hmm. of their ideals mm-hmm. or the death of the struggle. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm afraid of, because the movement changed with the assassination mm-hmm. of Dr. King. Today, if you look in the black community, neoconservative forces have
mm-hmm.
emerged.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't find the kinds of prophetic voices that existed with Malcolm X and King in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. We need to recapture that spirit of prophetic religion, mm-hmm. Of social activism that existed during that period, because we don't have it. We've become a part of the political processes in this country. Many of our major leaders are involved in those processes, some running for president. And I think that sort of stifles what could be strong prophetic voices, because Dr. King and Malcolm X operated outside of the system. Because they felt that once they became a part of the system, they couldn't be as prophetic as they would be outside of the system. So I think we need to recapture that spirit of prophetic religion that they brought to us, that sense of the need to be involved in struggle, that culture of resistance, as one scholar calls it.
And of course, I would imagine that both of you, during this last half minute that we have here, both of you would encourage individuals to become involved in the celebration of Dr. King's holiday, the birthday of Dr. King, and all of those other activities, just for the whole sake of not only remembering what has happened, but also, as the two of you, I think, have indicated, for laying the foundation so that we might be able to move forward. And of course, let me thank you, Dr. Al-Hadid and Dr. Baldwin, for another excellent show, because I think that in simply voicing information in reference to these two great leaders will sort of bring them together and make us have a better understanding of some of the things that they